In the summer of 1998, Ethan, Marcus, and Caleb left their bikes outside a cave on the edge of Mill Creek and stepped inside with flashlights and laughter. They never came out. For weeks, rescuers crawled through narrow tunnels, dogs sniffed at the entrances, and families begged for answers. Nothing surfaced. Then, nearly a month later, a team of cavers pushed deeper than anyone had gone before. What they dragged out of the darkness, scattered belongings tied directly to the boys, stunned the entire town. But the cave wasn't done keeping secrets, and the truth it hinted at was far darker than anyone could explain. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means the world and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us until the end, and if this mystery moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and pass it along to a friend. Want to help us decide the next story? Vote below and subscribe so you don't miss it. Now let's begin. Summer of 1998 carried that restless kind of heat in Mill Creek, a small town pressed up against ridges of limestone and pine. Days felt endless, kids darting between sprinklers while cicadas hummed their electric chorus in the trees. For 3 boys, the season wasn't about baseball or swimming pools. It was about discovery. Ethan, 14, was the ringleader. Tall for his age, mop of hair always falling into his eyes, the kind of kid who never seemed afraid of anything. Marcus, 13, was the joker, known for balancing on fences and cracking jokes until adults shook their heads. Caleb, the youngest at 12, followed them everywhere, quiet but eager, gripping his backpack straps tight as though that alone might prove he belonged. The cave had always been a dare in Mill Creek. Kids whispered about it behind the bleachers, called it the Hollow, a limestone mouth that gaped from the hillside, cool air breathing out even on the hottest days. Parents warned their kids to stay away, saying the tunnels were dangerous, uncharted. But warnings only made it magnetic. On July 12th, the boys met near the edge of town, bikes rattling over gravel as they pedaled toward the woods. Neighbors saw them pass, Marcus waving theatrically at a girl on her porch, Caleb trailing behind, Ethan calling back, "We'll be back before dark." Mrs. Willis, who tended her garden nearby, frowned as she watched them vanish into the trees. She leaned toward her husband, muttering low, "What's up with those boys in that cave again? One of these days." He cut her off with a shake of his head. "Boys will be boys. They'll come back muddy, that's all." At the cave's entrance, the boys dropped their bikes, flashlights clutched in sweaty hands. The air smelled of earth and minerals, damp and cold against their summer-warmed skin. Ethan grinned, daring the others forward. "Come on, it's just rock and shadows." Marcus made a face but followed. Caleb hesitated, adjusting the straps of his backpack before stepping in. They disappeared into the dark. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the gravel road where their bikes still leaned against the trees. Fireflies blinked in the dusk. By nightfall, when porch lights flickered on across Mill Creek, the boys had not come home. By 9 that night, the quiet rhythm of Mill Creek was broken. Ethan's mother stood at the window, her hand pressed to the glass, waiting for the crunch of bike tires on gravel. Marcus's father paced the porch, glancing down the road every few minutes. Caleb's sister called his name into the yard until her voice cracked. But no boys came. Calls between houses multiplied. "Is Ethan with you? Have you seen Marcus?" By 10, families gathered near the tree line, flashlights flicking nervously across the dark. Their bikes were still there, leaning like silent witnesses at the cave mouth, frames glinting under the beam of a flashlight. The air around the entrance was cool, carrying a faint metallic tang, damp and unsettling in the summer heat. Parents shouted into the cave, their voices echoing back hollow. No reply. Sheriff Dalton arrived with 2 deputies, boots crunching over gravel. He crouched near the cave entrance, running a hand across the dirt floor. Faint footprints trailed inward, overlapping, scuffed as if the boys had hurried. But beyond a few yards, the darkness swallowed everything. By midnight, word had spread. Neighbors gathered in clusters, whispering in the humid air. One man muttered, "What's up with those parents letting kids wander in there?" Another shook his head, replying softly, "Wow, you think this is their fault? It's that cave. Nothing good comes out of it." Their words lingered, heavy, while the families stood stiff with worry. Inside, searchers advanced only a short distance before pulling back. The narrow passage twisted sharply, water dripping from the ceiling, air thinning. Without ropes or maps, pushing further at night was too risky. "We'll start at dawn," the sheriff told the families, but his face was pale in the lantern light. When the sun rose over Mill Creek, the cave entrance looked the same as it always had, silent, unassuming, a dark scar in the hillside. But now, everyone knew 3 boys had gone in and not come back. The town held its breath. At first light, Mill Creek awoke to the sound of trucks rumbling toward the cave. Deputies marked off the area with tape, while volunteers in work boots and miners' helmets gathered at the edge of the woods. Some carried ropes coiled across their shoulders, others brought packs of food and lanterns. It felt less like a search party and more like an army preparing for battle. The sheriff laid a map across the hood of his cruiser, though it was hardly useful. The cave system was unmapped, just rumors of winding tunnels and pools of underground water. Still, he circled areas they could reach safely, sending teams in with careful instructions. Stay in pairs, mark chalk lines on the walls, never turn off your lights. Inside, the cave swallowed sound. Boots echoed on slick stone, water dripped in steady beats, and the smell of wet limestone clung to every breath. Searchers called the boys names: Ethan, Marcus, Caleb, but only their own voices came back, distorted and eerie. One team found scuffed rock near a tight passage, like someone had crawled through. Another swore they spotted a candy wrapper wedged between stones, but it was too waterlogged to prove anything. Dogs were brought to the entrance, noses pressed to the ground, but their excitement fizzled once the air cooled. The scent evaporated in the damp. Above ground, families clung to every update. Mothers sat on folding chairs at the edge of the tape, clutching rosaries and each other's hands. Fathers stared at the cave, their expressions stiff masks hiding panic. Behind them, neighbors murmured, "What's up with that place? I told my kids never to go near it." Another voice answered, "Wow, some caves just don't let go." Days passed, and frustration built. Rescuers pushed deeper but were forced back by drops into black water, by tunnels too narrow to crawl. Each return to daylight came with the same answer: nothing. By the end of the week, the sheriff's map was covered in scribbled notes and circles, yet not a single trace of the boys beyond their bikes had been recovered. The cave was no longer just stone and shadow. It was a maze that mocked every attempt to uncover its secret. By the second week, the cave was no longer just a place. It was a story. And in a town as small as Mill Creek, stories grow fast. Theories spread like cracks across dry earth. At the diner, conversations leaned close over steaming cups of coffee. "What's up with those boys? Maybe they ran away." A man shook his head, whispering back, "Nah, wow, not with their bikes sitting out front. Something else took them." Some believed the cave itself was cursed. Old-timers remembered whispers from their grandparents that the land beneath the limestone had always been strange. Animals that wandered too close were found dead, eyes clouded. Hunters spoke of drafts that howled like voices, of stones that shifted when no one touched them. Now, with 3 boys missing, those superstitions hardened into certainty. Others turned their suspicion inward. People wondered if someone had lured the boys down there. Caleb's neighbor claimed she saw a pickup parked by the woods that day, engine idling. Another swore they'd heard shouting near the tree line before dusk. Each rumor painted a different picture, none of them fitting neatly together. The families, already raw with grief, felt the sting of gossip. At church, Ethan's mother overheard 2 women muttering, "What kind of parents let kids go off like that?" Her face flushed, her hands tightening on her hymnal until the pages creased. Marcus's father, tired of whispers, snapped at a man outside the hardware store who implied the boys might have been causing trouble inside the cave. Fists nearly flew before the sheriff stepped in. Teenagers in town treated the cave like a dare. Some crept up at night, shining flashlights into its mouth, daring each other to step inside. One boy came running back pale, swearing he heard laughter echoing in the dark. Another claimed he saw 3 figures crouched against the stone wall, only to vanish when the light hit them. Parents locked doors, terrified that curiosity would drag more kids into the hillside. By the 3rd week, the cave was cordoned off completely. Wooden planks and chains barred the entrance, warning signs hammered into the dirt. But the barricade didn't silence the fear. It amplified it. People gathered outside their homes at night, staring toward the ridge as though waiting for something to crawl out of the earth. At the store, a clerk muttered, "It's been weeks. They're gone." The cave swallowed them. Another customer leaned in, whispering low. Or maybe it wasn't the cave. Maybe it was someone who knows these woods too well. The air thickened with suspicion, neighbors glancing at each other too long, wondering. The cave, once a playground for dares, had become a wound in Mill Creek, one that bled fear, rumor, and division. The boys were still missing, but their absence was no longer just silence. It was a story everyone wanted to finish, even if it meant inventing an ending. And then, almost a month after they vanished, something finally surfaced from the dark. It was exactly 29 days after the boys vanished when a team of experienced cavers, brought in from out of state, pushed deeper into the hollow than anyone from Mill Creek had dared. Equipped with ropes, oxygen tanks, and headlamps that cut through the black like knives, they descended into passages so narrow their shoulders scraped rock. The air grew colder, sharper, carrying a mineral tang that stung their throats. Hours in, the lead caver spotted something odd at the edge of an underground pool. He crouched, brushing away muck and gravel, and froze. Half buried in silt was a sneaker, its rubber sole peeling but its laces still intact. A name had been written on the tongue in fading marker: Marcus. The find jolted the team. Sweeping their lights wider, they uncovered more. A rusted flashlight wedged in a crack, its plastic casing cracked open. Nearby, a scrap of fabric tangled in stone, dark blue and stiff with age. And just beyond, in a chamber where water dripped steadily from the ceiling, sat a small backpack, the zipper corroded but faint initials still legible: C.H., Caleb's. When the cavers returned to the surface, their faces were pale. The sheriff met them at the barricade, and the items were laid out on a tarp under harsh lantern light. Parents lunged forward, hands shaking as they recognized what they had once packed for their sons. The news spread through Mill Creek before sunrise. "They found something in the cave," whispered a man at the gas station. Another leaned closer, wide-eyed. "What's up with that? A whole month gone, and suddenly their things show up?" A woman crossed herself, whispering, "Wow, maybe the cave didn't want to keep hiding them." What was missing, however, was even more unsettling. No bodies, no clear sign of where the boys had gone after dropping those belongings. Just fragments of their lives, scattered deep in the dark, as though the cave had offered up a cruel tease of truth and swallowed the rest. The discovery brought no comfort, only sharper pain. The sheriff stood before cameras, holding back his words like they might break him. "We've recovered personal effects belonging to Ethan, Marcus, and Caleb," he said flatly. "At this time, we cannot confirm." His voice trailed. Everyone knew what he couldn't finish. The families clutched the items with trembling hands. Marcus's shoe, Caleb's backpack, Ethan's cracked flashlight, ordinary things turned into relics. Ethan's mother pressed the flashlight to her chest like it might still be warm from his hands. Caleb's sister whispered through tears. He carried that bag every day. For them, proof of presence was also proof of absence. Experts mapped the chamber where the belongings were found, but the cave refused to yield more. Narrow tunnels dropped into black pools, passages too dangerous to explore further. "It's like the cave is hiding the rest," one caver muttered after surfacing, his skin still slick with mud. Theories reignited with new fire. At the diner, voices rose over clattering plates. "What's up with finding their stuff but not them?" a man asked. Another leaned in close, lowering his tone. "Wow, someone put those things there. Maybe to make it look like the cave swallowed them." Some nodded, others shook their heads. Truth had become impossible to separate from speculation. The sheriff sealed the cave after a final sweep, posting warning signs and erecting a heavy gate. But that didn't stop people from talking. Teenagers dared each other to bike to the barricade at night, claiming you could hear tapping from inside. Hikers told stories of voices echoing through the ridge, calling names in the dark. For the families, the closure was cruel. No bodies to bury, no graves to visit, only objects laid out on shelves like fragments of unfinished lives. Birthdays passed with empty chairs, Christmases with unopened gifts left at the tree. The cave remained, silent and unbothered, a scar in the hillside. Mill Creek moved on in fragments, but the story of 3 boys who vanished into the dark stayed alive, whispered on porches, retold by strangers, reshaped into legend. And so, the cave kept its secret, offering only enough to haunt, never enough to heal. For a month, Mill Creek searched for Ethan, Marcus, and Caleb, and when the cave finally gave something back, it was darker than the silence itself. If stories like this keep you gripped, don't forget to subscribe, drop a like, and hit the bell, because the next mystery we uncover might haunt you even more.